I'll make this quick. We all just presented right now with the synergy around data and around pushing the industry forward through collaboration. With that said, obviously, if we want to have this conversation really quickly, we need to be forward thinking in our conversation, right? So the commonality between your platforms is that it's heavily reliant upon 3D elements as well as collaboration in real time. And with that, there's requirements long-term for the industry to start to share data in a way that they haven't before. How do we incentivize the industry from the owner all the way down to the trade contractor to start to be strategic in the way that they approach data strategy from the plan and design stage all the way through closeout, but in a way that releases knowledge for the rest of the industry to benefit from, even if their company doesn't benefit the most?
I can go first. Look, if machine learning and AI is going to do anything for us, it's going to make the phrase data strategy be something none of us ever have to do in the future. Before I joined Schema, I spent a couple of years launching a new company that was very focused on trying to figure out what was happening, why it happened, and then what will happen. And conversations with nearly every firm I talked to, the first thing they said is like, well, no, we'd love to work with you, but we need to get our data strategy right first. So I do think there's a big danger in starting with the center when we should be thinking more about the outcomes. So what are the decisions that we think we need to be making better? You know, what are the things that actually cause outcome issues that if only I knew more, then I could have solved that earlier. So one of the things I would really advise people is if you want to implement some of these solutions, please don't start by almost like a handoff, being ashamed of the fact that you don't understand your own data. That is what these tools should be doing for you.
And I think from our side, I think anything like open standards, right? So I mean, I think open, interoperable, something where you can share to make the data, because there is so much back there. How do you make it accessible to the right users at the right time so they can actually consume it, use it, and bring knowledge out from it? Anything that is leading into that and making that more accessible to more users, so it's not locked away someplace, right, where I have to jump through hoops to get it, because the first thing somebody's going to do is not jump through that hoop and then not get that data. So I think it's more about that openness and the open standards and being able to communicate that effectively and opening up all of those closets so that, you know, the skeletons are there from the previous projects. We know what they are. They're not just hidden back there. So.
On the subject of sustainability, which I believe his name is James Dean, had mentioned around the cost of being able to produce a sustainable project from a carbon emission standpoint. I'm curious your standpoints on how do we leverage technology, or how do we re-incentivize stakeholders on the project who don't benefit from the operational asset, but only benefit from the construction execution? How do we get them to reshape their strategy around benefiting the entire life cycle of the project if they don't actually get anything from post-handover? I'm curious your thoughts on that as we tackle the climate change and our carbon emission reframing from a carbon tax versus carbon credit standpoint.
Do you want to take that one? Look, there's carrots and sticks. I don't think I think as an industry, we're on the right path, on a mission to try and see, you know, how we can become more efficient and reduce carbon. And I got to tell you, but on that efficiency piece, you know, until we deal with the 20-30% of inefficiency we have in the process, I think we're just chipping away a little bit. You know, I'm not going to embarrass the company, but they're one of the big 4 construction companies in the US, and they just have this internal thing where they say, you know, for every 4 buildings we build, we put 1 in the ground. You know, that's just what's happening right now. I think you probably do more to reduce the amount of carbon waste by having better models that people trust, that get to supply chain and the industrial prefabrication process sooner, and with a certainty that this thing is actually constructible, so we don't at every stage keep trying to break it down and try and solve it at each stage. You know, we discovered when I was at Katerra, where we were trying to solve everything in one go, you know, we just found that the biggest issues we had were not necessarily about data. It was, even though data is important, it was the fact that we just lived with waste, so I'm not the best person to talk to about carbon in a way, because I absolutely fundamentally believe we should be doing everything we can to reduce, operational and embodied carbon. But I do believe that we're going to do more to reduce carbon by looking at the whole of the design into construction process more holistically.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, it's finding out what's valuable to them and communicating that to them. So what is the incentive that's valuable to them? When I first joined Cesium, I was working on the smart construction activities, where there's lots of efficiencies and, how do you model cut and fill areas, how many machines are running, all of, flying drones every day and taking all that stuff. So it's a technology solution. But then when we went out to the field and talked to the GCs, to the guys that were actually doing the work, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not communicating the way that I see value. It's too hard to get to. What do I need to, like, my job is I've got 10 guys on the site. Like, I've got to get this done because I have 3 other sites I got to get to. Give me something that will help with that. So to me, it's, again, with the carbon and the emissions, which I am by no means an expert in any of this, I feel like it's understanding how we can incentivize them and what's important to them, and then relate it to that. And trying to figure out solutions around that, as opposed to force feeding and say, you just do it this way,
Yeah,
this.
I agree. I don't think the relative values have been very well described. I mean, look, we know for a certain we could go to one company in the US that produces more than 35% of all the cement that's used in buildings, and probably reduce a huge amount of the embodied carbon, operational carbon, just by working with that one company. And the same could be said of a lot of the other material suppliers. And again, I hate calling out company names, but they know who they are. And that they're doing everything they can, but they have a lower carbon cement mix. And the problem is that there isn't a lot of incentive when it hits the streets for people to use it, so.
I know we're at time, but last closing thoughts here is, what are you most optimistic about as we emerge with a post-generative AI society and all the new technology that's becoming available and democratized? What are you guys looking forward to most? I'll start with the fact that I think now, with the availability of technology that usually has been locked into the hands of a small few, we have more people able to leverage tools in ways that unlock their creative thinking, and in particular, redefines what productivity means on a project, while also starting to pull back the people who've been taking advantage of inefficiency. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm curious you guys' thoughts on what you're most looking forward to in the future.
It feels like you're setting me up. No, I'm kidding.
I just follow you.
Look, I think if we look at the generation of technology that we've been using as designers and construction professionals, we've been in the age of individual productivity tools, and our product managers to talk about that was a product management presentation, I guess, is that our product managers have spent the last 20 years speaking to super users of products, saying how could we improve the products, and it's come down to, well, that upload time takes. The time to load the Revit model takes too long. I don't like the number of clicks it takes me to do this. If you solve those things, my life's going to be better as an individual productivity. I'm optimistic that technologists are now starting to say, okay, I know we could make that better, but we have to start focusing on firm productivity. We have to look at different types of value, different types of outcome. And I gotta say is that the optimistic part of me is that, I do feel the role of architects and construction professionals generally. I'll quote the chairman of Thornton Tomasetti, Tom, who's there, and it was a conference in New York, and he said he used to go to dinner parties and be ashamed to say he was a structural designer because it was so unsexy and didn't seem interesting at all. He says, I'm now in one of the most vibrant, exciting industries, doing some of the more exciting things as we start to really change the way that all our professions work. And he said, architects are starting to do more design than delivery. Our structural engineers are getting involved in helping to design projects. This used to be different. And I think my optimism is that hopefully people don't have to go through what I went through in my career as a designer, which is just trying to figure out how to get that thing into a digital format and get it to a printing machine. we actually start to do way more interesting work, and it'd be a much more inspirational place for people to want to come and spend their careers.
I think for me, it's the new challenges. People are going to start to use this technology, this software in ways they're going to be asking questions of the data, of the systems, of the solutions that we don't even know yet. So there's going to be new challenges for how do we approach this data? How do we present the new questions that come out of this way that we're showing this information? When I first started I started in geospatial world, and having a map on your phone was like, didn't even exist, right? I mean, and then when it was on the phone, and then a guy in the field had it on his phone, and then you started to ask, oh, wait, I can do this. Now, what about this? What about this? What about this? Right? So I think it's when you start to push that out there, and then it's the next, well, what about this question? And then how do we address those?
I think if I could chime in here, I think one of the two things are the roles that will start to emerge, in that you start to have the industry has been, especially like in the architecture side, there's just one path trajectory, and then there's going to be new rules that emerge from that, and I think that's very exciting. But it's also going to force the value proposition to actually emerge, right? Because I think what if you take away, oh, I'm not actively involved in the process, which I mean, yes, you should be, but what is the real value you're offering the client? It's not placing doors, it's not like doing all the fancy stuff with the software. It's actually delivering some kind of service to the client. So I think the emergence of, new value proposition, new business models, and then new roles, I think that's exciting.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate the time.